Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for joining. It is my distinct pleasure that Professor Tirthankar Roy and Dr. Raman accepted our invite graciously to address us on their recent book on the economic development of Kerala. Kerala has been a region that uh, has a model associated with it, an eponymous model associated with it, the Kerala model, and that has really formed a crucial part of the discourse on policy, especially in contradistinction with the Gujarat model. And therefore, in order to interrogate the economic development of Kerala through a historical sense and uh, the environmental sense as well, especially in the wake of the recent ecological crises that have come up. We thought that it would be great to have a book session, to have a book talk on this book. And once again, thank you so much, Professor Roy and Dr. Raman, for accepting our invite. Caucus, the discussion forum, was a student society that was formed in 2007. And while initially it focused only on MUNs, it has gradually grown to host sessions on economics, on developmental studies, on matters of society and culture. And this year, with this session, we aim to look at the intricacies of the different strands of development or developmental processes that have unfolded, and the series of which this book is a part also aims to do that, to look at the different states and the developmental trajectories. Now, I'll have Professor Roy and Dr. Raman do much of the speaking after this, but I would like to ask Suhani Kumar, a second year member of Caucus, who is from the economics department, to once introduce both of our speakers, and then I would request them to take over. Suhani, please, if you're here.
Yeah. First of all, good evening, everyone. With great pleasure, I'd like to introduce you all to our esteemed speakers, Professor Tirthankar Roy and Dr. KRaviRaman. Professor Tirthankar Roy is a distinguished scholar specializing in South Asian and global history, currently teaching at the London School of Economics. His groundbreaking work on economic history has shed new light on the relationship between India's past, present, and its climatic conditions. He is the author of the acclaimed book Monsoon Economies India's History in Changing Climate, which delves deep into the long term patterns of Indian capitalism and its evolution. His latest work, Water and Development The Troubled Economic History of the Arid Tropics, examines the critical role of water management in shaping the economic trajectories of regions like India. With a rich body of work that includes exploring the impact of British colonial law on India's economy, Professor Tirthankar Roy brings a unique perspective to understanding the complexity of India's development journey. Talking about Dr. KRaviRaman, he is a distinguished scholar whose work has shaped our understanding of power, history, and social change in India. Dr. KRaviRaman is a leading authority on the experiences of indigenous, Dalit, and backward communities, and the interplay of globalization and local realities. With a rich academic background that includes fellowships at prestigious institutions like University of Manchester and Queen Elizabeth House, Oxford, he brings a unique perspective to his work. His interdisciplinary approach, combining political economy, development studies, and historical anthropology, has produced groundbreaking research that challenges conventional narratives and illuminates the voices of subaltern. With this, I'd like to thank you too for joining the book talk session with us. Looking forward for an interesting and insightful discussion. Thank you.
Shall we start? Okay, good. Excellent. So on behalf of Ravi, my co-author and a longtime friend, and myself, I thank you, the organizers of Caucus, for inviting us to this book talk, and also a special thanks to Suhani for introducing us. We are very pleased because this is really the first book talk we are doing. So whatever happens here will be a very useful experience for us in planning the next series of talks, which we do actually mean to have. The way we'll organize this is that I'll start with a set of slides which gives you a sense of the series and what we are doing in this book very generally. And then Ravi will focus on some of the most critical aspects of Kerala's evolution, which is the public policy and political side, but also in the backdrop of the disaster that has happened very recently, also the environmental side, which is very closely connected with public policy. and what Kerala is all about. So let me start with sharing my screen. Okay, I hope you can all see this. Can you
Yes,
all see the screen?
yes, sir. Can see.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So very briefly, this is the title of the book, and it's the first book in a book series, which is called Economic Histories of Indian States, which is being published by the Cambridge University Press. There are about 6 titles more in the pipeline right now. They're being developed, and of course, India has 26 odd large states, some bifurcated, and I mean it's quite a large set. But we are not in a rush to have produce a book on every one of these. The general idea behind the series is that most of India's states are, in terms of population and area, they are very large. I mean, as large as the average country in the world. But also, they have very distinct histories. Many of them, both post-independence as well as the colonial times. Some were under princely state rule. Some have very strong left movement or distinct regional political movements. Their geographies are different, their culture is different, language is different, and in some way, of course, we are all part of the federal setup as well. So, but when we talk about economic change, there is often an overemphasis on the federal setup, what Delhi is doing or thinking. And we thought we will change that and write the history of post-independence evolution from the other end, from the state's end. Of course, the federal policy never goes away. That's very much in the picture, but there is more than that to the state's development. So that was the general idea. But these are also, in terms of style, going to be very accessible books. Anybody interested can pick up and read it. They don't have to be from a scholarly world or academic world or economists. However, they will be written by scholars. So that was the general idea, which is why it's often very hard to find an author who can write a book on, say, MP or Rajasthan in a historical frame. Most economists don't think in those terms. Most historians don't think about the recent times. So as I said, I mean, we are not in a rush. I'm one of the series editors, so that I'm speaking on behalf of the series, and we are not in a rush to commission books, but they are happening. It's a series that is picking up. Now, Kerala is the first book that in the series, and we are very pleased to write it precisely because, as the initial statement said, Kerala's growth is one of the most debated subjects. So in some way, it's easy to write a book on this state, but also more difficult because the kind of debate or discourse that exists, Kerala's history has kind of left them behind. Um, the standard starting point here is I mean, if you go back to 1981, Kerala had a much higher level of social development than the rest of India. um, Literacy is just one index, but if you take infant mortality rate or uh, life expectancy rate, you see a very similar picture. However, it was poorer than than the average India. Already, India was a poor country at that time in terms of per capita income, but Kerala was even poorer. So it was really, as Frank and Chassin said, desperately poor uh, region. Now that's where the Kerala model, which was mentioned, come from. Now Ravi and I were both students in Center for Development Studies in Trivandrum in the 1980s, which was not just a place which debated the Kerala model, but which actually gave shape to it. It led the discourse in some way. So we were very much in the thick of the kind of debate that was happening in the 1980s on the Kerala model. And it was a very inspiring message that came from the various people, very big names wrote about it. And the message was that, well, here is an overwhelmingly poor country, but that's no reason to be a poor state, a poor region, but income poor. But that's no reason to despair because it's pretty well developed, and by some measure of development, it is actually doing very well. Now that had a message for other regions of India, which many of these had very weak growth rates or very poor incomes. But the message was very hopeful, very optimistic that you can actually create conditions for development if you do the right things. Now, then that opened up a huge set of questions. One was, of course, what is it that is working for Kerala? And the focus fell very strongly on public goods policy. Um, but also, when historians joined it, they brought in Kerala's distinct political history, religious organizations, communist and social equality movements. All of these fed into, in some fashion, this social development, and it kind of opened up a whole new research agenda. Now, by 1990s, early 2000s, the model was kind of going out of fashion. I mean, nobody talked about it very much anymore. Amartya Sen and Gerald Reyes continued to talk about it, but uh, I mean, this example was very important for their kind of message on Indian development. But as a history of Kerala, the model wasn't really working very well. And that's because there were fierce criticisms about this concept that Kerala was a success story in some fashion. Um, I mean, Ravi has written about it. I mean, many of our friends have written about this. One common point was that the model overlooked inequality, and the second point was that the model overlooked fiscal sustainability. And this, I mean, with a weak income growth rate, you cannot really sustain the public goods drive which created the model. That was the argument. A third and the third point which we pick up on is that the model does not actually explain turnaround in income. It's generally very pessimistic about income. I mean, the message was that don't worry about income. But then some of the most interesting things that have happened in Kerala in the last 20 years is really about income, average income. The 2000s saw a significant rise in average incomes in Kerala, surpassing India by a very wide margin, Indian average. Whereas on the social development, India has been catching up. As you can imagine, I mean, this is a worldwide phenomenon that literacy rate can only go up to 100%. I mean, it can't go up more. Income can keep growing, but literacy has a ceiling. Most other social development measures have a ceiling. And other countries which start low and catch up. So the gap gets smaller. That's not a very interesting to discuss anymore. However, what is interesting is that there has been a significant turnaround in income, and model doesn't illustrate that. The model, if anything, really overlooks that side. I mean, it says, don't think about it. And that wasn't. I mean, we start by challenging that in some way. So the questions for us was, why did this forging ahead in income growth happen? What's the connection between this turnaround and public policy? And how does politics and ideology shape public policy? I mean, all of these ingredients have been discussed in relation to Kerala model, but now they need to be discussed in a different way. And we thought we should make a start. Now, just to give you a sense of what region we are talking about, let's start by geography and history. This is the first, the section on the left shows the political boundaries just before independence. And you can see the shaded areas are princely states. The white areas are British Indian provinces. And as you can see, the borders of modern Kerala were formed of different types of political units. And that's partly a very interesting fact for a historian to explore.
So, Tirtho, sorry for
Yeah.
interruption,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
that slide is not shown. I don't know whether others can see that. I can't see it here. Now it's fine. Now it's fine.
Now it is
Okay,
visible.
okay. Okay. Can you see it now?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thanks. That's the first map, and the second map shows the mountains. And as you can see, there's a very long, almost unbroken chain of mountains, which borders the state border. Um, the interesting thing about this mountain is that historically, Kerala has been very outward looking. It's been doing a lot of trade. It's been migrating a lot. But if you observe with which region Kerala has been transacting the most, you'll find that it transacts most with West Asia. The mountains are not very easily easy to cross, and the trade links historically, I'm not talking about now, but trade links, migration links have been relatively weaker with the rest of India, but very strong with the rest of Asia, especially West Asia. Finally, the final map shows climatic zones, and the darker shade is equatorial zone, which means very heavy rainfall, very wet, a lot of lowlands, and these get flooded. It's a completely different, geographically speaking, climatically speaking, it's a completely different setup from, say, the middle of the Deccan Plateau, which is very arid and very dry. So, with that backdrop, there are five themes that the book talks about. One is, of course, as I said, the West Asia connection, which, as you all know, Kerala has been exporting a huge number of people to the Gulf states since the 1970s to work there. And the remittance and migration figures very big in any story of economic change since that time. However, what we also need to remember is that this is not a one-off. This is not a sudden thing. It had a long prehistory, and that prehistory has been almost centuries old, in transactions through trade, through migration, through capital movements, investment movements, resettlements between Kerala and West Asia. Secondly, the climate and the topography create possibilities for certain types of natural resource extraction, which doesn't happen with the rest of India. I mean, you have a lot more tree crops, very valuable tree crops like pepper, coconut, rubber, wood for plywood, and of course seafood, given the long coastline. Um, Now, because of these resources, largely because of these resources, there has been a significant inflow of business investment in the 19th and 20th century into Kerala in processing some of these goods. After independence, much of that capital left, but a part of the recent business history is a revival of resource intensive industries in the state, resource intensive services as well. Tourism is one of them. Um, and on labor, of course, it's a well-known story that this is a very densely populated but literate region, which has been a source region for export of literate people working elsewhere in the rest of India. The West Asian economic boom since the 1970s, fed by oil prices, created unique opportunities for this flow of people. In the last 50 years, Kerala has been the leading exporter of people to this region. But this boom is now slowing. Other regions are catching up. And while it is slowing, the numbers are falling, but the skill levels have improved somewhat. So it's kind of matured in a way. Um, and The message of this book is that, in terms of politics or public policies, that for a long time, the Kerala's politics hadn't been quite tuned to economic change. However, more recently, there has been a compatibility developed between public policy and the pattern of economic change that is growing, that is developing. The state has been focusing mainly on inequality, deprivation, public participation in political processes, which is a legacy of the left movement to some extent. Whereas the business investment is allowed a freer room to play. There's been a massive accent on infrastructure, which feeds into private investment. Now, it's not a happy story necessarily, and the last months, well, earlier this month, the disaster tells us that there are problems, very serious problems. One, of course, is that the specter of fiscal stress is never far away. It's always there because the government is overcommitted to sustaining this process of change. Secondly, of course, any development process which focuses too much on natural resource in a vulnerable environment can create certain type of distortions. And the Kerala's accent on tourism, its development of natural sites have seen overdevelopment, or often disregard for environmental rules, deforestation, and a variety of other distortions which are taking a toll. And finally, while this is still somewhat of a service exporting economy, However, the quality of these services, and especially the quality of training and education in-house, is not great. There are, I mean, if you go through, say, the NAC ranked institutions in India, I mean, you'll find very few in the top 50 which are based in Kerala. So it's not doing particularly well in skilling its own people. So I think I'll just stop there and leave some time for Ravi to fill in, because what he's going to say is very important, and it's not my expertise. So please.
No, it's not like that. I don't think I have many things to add to what Tirtho has already said, because I think he has covered the critical aspects, and I don't think I have many things to add. But I must say that, as Tirtho has rightly pointed out, there is some sort of a compatibility between the state and the ideology, or between the left government and the way in which a state uh, is performing in terms of development that's taking place in Kerala. That is a new kind of symbiosis between private investment and the leftist ideology. That has become so visible, particularly after what is called the 2000s. And recently, that is almost clear that we really wanted to generate more and more market-led activities. And it is specifically in that context that we raise the point that capitalism has helped communism in two ways. One is that it has accentuated the activities of market and generates revenue for the state. And secondly, the government is in a position to use that revenue and allocate more resources for infrastructure without compromising social development. So that means that the government is now ready for some sort of a balanced development. But at the same time, as Tirtho has rightly pointed out, the environmental cost of this development, that is to be addressed seriously, and we are also not quite sure to what extent government has been successful in doing that. But of course, government has taken sincere effort, and but we find that the last disaster a few days back in Wayanad, that was essentially the outcome of extreme rainfall, and of course that was also explained in terms of what is called a continuous shift that has taken place in the land use pattern of Kerala. Actually, that ecology, of course, Tirtho has explained. You have these highlands where you grow this what is called commercial crops, and in the lower hills you have this rubber, and in the midlands you have coconut and other what is called um, uh, banana cultivation and other crops, the mixed tree crops. And in the coastal, uh, you have a very long coastline, 580 kilometers, and that way ocean resources are very rich for the fisher folk and also for the Kerala community as a whole. So basically, there is a continuous increase, what is called of pressure on the existing land-based resources. That's one major point that we wanted to highlight here, and also as part of this continuous urbanization process that's taking place in Kerala, that also exerts fresh pressures on the existing what is called ecosystem. So that way, basically, that's going to be a major challenge for us to address. And yet another challenge that we need to address seems uh, that the society by and large is an aging society. The nearly 18 to 20% of its population is more than 60 years old. So that again is going to be a problem, because they are not going to contribute to the economy. But at the same time, as I told you, that government doesn't want to compromise the social welfare activities. So we'll have to spend more resources for for carrying the old age population. Yet another task is, as Tirtho has rightly pointed out, is something connected with higher education. It's true that the primary education perform well, but at the same time, we have a statement somewhere here that for Kerala by Kerala, that's not going to work. That's what we wanted to say, because that wouldn't help the youth to capture the global opportunities, first of all. that also is not going to help us in skilling its own domestic population. So in every sense, the higher education, instead of focusing on quantity, of course they have been focusing on quantity privately, specifically because there is so much private investment taking place in higher education. So obviously they are more interested in quantity, not in quality. That's a point that Tirtho has highlighted. So there again, we need to there again we find major public policy challenges. And of course, as part of this continuous shift and structural changes taking place in land resources, there is an increase in what is called food dependency on the remaining states and also for the center. Actually, at the time of the state formation, our food dependency was of the order of 50%. Now it has gone to 70, 75%, more than that, 80%, I would say. That means 15 to 20% of the food requirement is produced domestically. For the rest, we depend on other states and also for the government of India. So, of course, it was part of kind of understanding between the center and the state that we went for that sort of a strategy, because there was a kind of understanding that, look, you have comparative advantage in commercial crops. So you specialize in commercial crops and you receive, you earn us what is called the foreign exchange. And and for in terms of compensation, we'll meet your food requirements. That was a kind of understanding. But as part of this, the rift in center state relations, this has become a major issue now, and we don't find much resources transferring from the center to the state. So that also has become a new source of what is called conflict between the center and the state. So what I'm let me complete this by saying that, look, I mean, it's true that the left government, we attribute the what is called, or we acknowledge the contributions of the left legacy in building up whatever we have. But at the same time, we also wanted to say that the left has gone for some sort of a compromise, and I would say that it is it is in favor of the people, I would say, because that's the logic of this argument, that you need resources, and that resources are generated through market activities. That means you need a better and higher forms of global integration, and that's how that we need to generate resources for the improvement of the larger society. And we find that sort of a shift that has been taking place in Kerala, particularly since 2016, and we find that a different kind of turnaround is taking place in terms of infrastructure, that also without compromising social development. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you so
Tirtho,
much.
would you like to add something?
No, not right now. I mean, I think there will be possible, hopefully, questions about some of these aspects. So we can join in.
Thanks.
Right. Thank you so much, Professor Roy. Thank you so much, Dr. Raman. There are a lot of issues that we would like to pursue. I and Anshu will be asking some questions from our side to sort of pursue some strands of argumentation or historical or economic processes that were at play. And then, based on how much time is available, we'll open it to the floor if they want to ask any additional questions. So, to start off, since the book has a very interesting section on the historical aspect as well, the colonial period as well. And since Professor Roy, you spent a large part of your career sort of debunking this notion that the colonial state was a Leviathan incarnate, which was out there to impoverish the Indian masses and so on and so forth, and the sort of the all around this, whether it was around Morris D. Morris and the debate and so on and so forth. How do you see the impact of the colonial state in and parts such as British Malabar, certainly the princely state of Travancore as well, and this process of market integration that was unfolding during the colonial time? Because based on at least my reading of some of your works, you've really highlighted how market integration was a very tangible process that was going on at this time, which led to reduction of famine, possibly led to the reduction of famine intensity as well. So how do you evaluate these two or three strands of processes that were unfolding during the colonial period?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I think this region is one which I mean, where it's the hardest to fit any preconceptions about colonialism, because it is not colonial. It's a mixed polity, and but it also illustrates some of the, as you said. I mean, if the British Indian rule had any kind of economic policy, I mean, it didn't. It never published a blueprint. But if it had, it will be that we are working for private investment or private business. And Malabar region, but also to some extent the southern part, had received quite significant investments in resource extraction industries that employed many thousands of people. These businesses sustained major cities. It sustained auxiliary industries which were owned by Syrian Christian entrepreneurs or local entrepreneurs, other entrepreneurs. So it was quite a big deal in 19th and 20th centuries. I mean, probably one of the few regions where you have a significant development of not port city based enterprise, something that we have seen in Bombay, Calcutta, or Madras. This is not a port city based enterprise, but based on resource extraction, natural resource extraction with foreign investment, and leaving quite a significant legacy. So some of the major industries that work in Kerala now are producing a lot of profits, had a kind of colonial roots. I mean, you can think of spice. I mean, spice paper has been a trade for a very long time. It's a money maker. But today again, there has been a revival of paper business, but not quite in the old way. I mean, today you have more spice extracts, which is a high-tech operation, but making flavoring agents and things like that. But it's still the same pattern of change in the sense that it relies on natural resources, comparative advantage that comes from Kerala's unique geography. So, I mean, a simple answer to your question is that I don't think that, I mean, there's a lot of point in pursuing colonial policy in understanding Kerala's prehistory.
Thank you so much, sir, for that answer. As an extension or a follow-up to this question, uh, while it is true, and I felt the same as well, that there's been a lot of imposition of a priori or normative models on actually understanding economic history. I think a point that you have highlighted as well. Uh, the issue is that post-independence, it was such a presumption that actually led to the economic policy of Delhi, which led to the pursuit of an autarkic economic policy via exchange rates or restrictions on remittances and so on. So, could you shed light on some of the implications in the aftermath of independence? In comparison, also perhaps with other states that eventually underwent deindustrialization, such as Bengal.
Yeah, just to qualify what I said before, I mean, I think some of these things I said will need to be qualified when you come to tea industry. But Ravi is the expert there, so he will probably want to talk about that a little more. But no, you are right. I think I mean, the common pattern here is that many resource extractive industries in other parts of, I mean, generally speaking, declined after 1947 because of government restrictions, but a variety of other policies. I mean, think of the biggest trade in the 20th century is grain trade, commodity trade. That was completely basically forbidden. But there were other effects of policies as well. I mean, the regions which were primarily exporting resource-based industries suffered. Um, Tea is a very good example of decline over in the 1960s, 70s, 80s. It moved away from export market, reoriented to domestic market, and generally suffered a fall in average quality of tea. And that's changing again, but it's been a kind of U-shaped experience with tea. And you may find many other industries which will speak to the same kind of pattern: a decline and then again revival with different type of entrepreneurs. But I don't want to be overly pessimistic about this. I think this aspect of the post-independence policy is not normally talked about. It was damaging. I think in terms of business development, the post-independence, the Nehruvian policy was damaging for resource-based regions like Kerala, like West Bengal. However, there are many other things which a British colonial state would never think of, like investing heavily in public goods, or I mean, they were generally very standoff in terms of social equality or inequality reform movements. They stood at a distance. I mean, the state didn't really want to engage with what the Indians were doing, so it was largely left to the civil society. Now, politics has changed completely after 1947, and so politics actually, mainstream politics takes up the deprivations, injustices in civil society. That is something that the colonial rulers never would step into. So we have had a tremendous change in that direction, and that's a good change. And Kerala, I think, is again a model in some way in making social equality come to the forefront of political movements.
Thank you, Professor Roy, for that answer. So, as Dr. Raman mentioned previously regarding the floods that we have had recently and such a disaster that we had, it, and there's a question on that. In chapter 8 of the book, it was highlighted that the impact of unregulated expansion of residential areas along riverbanks and water bodies and so forth led to heightened risk of floods. So the floods in 2018 and 19 serve as a sort of evidence to these factors. So, in light of the recent disaster that we witnessed, it generally raises a question whether there has been a deficiency in effective disaster management strategies in the state level. So, Dr. Raman, to what effect do you evaluate the extent to which the insights gained from the prior assessments, such as the floods in 2018 and 19, have been like put into practice?
Yeah, I mean, and that's a good question. In fact, by and large, we explain the 2018, 2019 flood and also the last disaster, the landslides in Wayanad. By and large, we attribute this to extreme rainfall. But that doesn't mean that that's the only reason, because there were several reasons, and the one reason that you have already highlighted is the extension of residential, what is called built up spaces. So there was a continuous increase in the residential built up spaces, and that was attributable to what is called the, first of all, remittances in the 80s. And though that was first confined to what is called houses, later it got extended to hotels, restaurants, or what is called, as Tirtho rightly pointed out, on tourism activities and like that. So uh, basically, sometimes one may feel that we have lost that sort of a strategy of going for a balanced kind of a development. Somehow we continue to focus on growth and continue to focus on more investments on what is called land grabbing sort of activities. So that has put extra pressure on otherwise fragile lands, fragile ecological uh, situations, and that must be the reason for the floods and landslides. So apart from that, you also asked the question of what is called the expenses. I think you are asking me about the way in which we spend money, or because actually we have this what is called a CMDR. Uh, is that the question that you asked? Sorry, the second question that
Uh,
you asked.
Yeah, so basically I asked you like there were certain reassessments done after the 2018 and 2019 floods. So to what extent did the state sort of implement those reassessments and how successful was it in implementing?
Yeah,
I think
definitely. Yeah, I would say that Kerala has been successful in implementing some of those what is called decisions that we have taken as part of this what is called UN-led post-development disaster report. I'm not sure whether you have seen. I mean, it's readily available, and they have provided some suggestions. And after that, we also consulted some international bodies, and we found that we'll have to go for certain strategies. And I don't think that we are deficit in that sort of disaster management strategies, But I tell you that there is continuous pressure from various social forces. So it is not that easy for us to go for a particular policy choice. Say, for instance, you must be quite familiar with the Madhav Gadgil report or other kinds of reports and like that. Of course, Madhav Gadgil report was not accepted by the central government, and then you got a Kasuri Irangan report, but that was the government of Kerala was not ready to accept that. I mean, in its true spirit. But then we have had yet another report that's very much there. So what I'm trying to say is that we have large number of reports, and they have all put forward various strategies. We are not against implementing. I mean, most of the suggestions, but at the same time, the practical side is not that easy. It's a bit complicated because it is how that the spatial pattern of Kerala has been evolved. You have had this what is called settlements in the highlands right from second world war period, 1935 onwards or 39 onwards. There was one stream of migration taking place to the what is called the highlands. So I mean, it's not that easy for us to rehabilitate them, but at the same time we have taken every step to rehabilitate uh, those people from the most vulnerable zones, vulnerable areas. But this happens, but we are very keen in offering what is called very creative solutions for this kind of environmental risks.
Also, Professor Roy, you have raised your hand,
Yeah.
so would like.
Yeah. Okay. First, let me put my hand down. No, I just wanted to say something about tourism. I mean, Kerala is, I mean, notwithstanding this hugely hyped up God's own country campaigns and all that, I mean, Kerala is not necessarily the leading destination for foreign tourists. Domestic tourism, yes, quite a lot of domestic tourists go to Kerala, but in terms of number, other states, I mean, Kerala is kind of is somewhere in the middle. I mean, there are other states which lead. The problem with tourism in Kerala is that it's almost entirely nature oriented. I mean, if you are traveling in Delhi, Rajasthan, you have lots of places to go to, which are, I mean, historical places, monuments, cities, towns. But Kerala, the significant pressure falls on mountains, backwaters, lakes, wetlands, and that kind of places, which are already somewhat vulnerable environments. I mean, we don't really understand what the effects are of deforestation build up in that kind of an environment. So, and there's been a tremendous pressure to build up things geared to tourism. So, tourism is not the only thing, as Ravi mentioned. I mean, there are behind the building up, there are lots of pressures, but tourism is one pressure, which falls on vulnerable nature in a very concentrated way, because that's what people go to Kerala for.
Thank you, sir. As a follow-up to the question regarding disasters, the recent disasters that have been unfolding in Kerala as a result of the settlement, the developments in the settlement pattern that have occurred. One question that I would like to ask Dr. Raman is regarding at least one strand of the dominant discourse on policy that I feel is very common, at least in the civil sphere, that we tend to treat stakeholders as monoliths. So, for instance, between the rich and the poor, even though is a greater stratification or internal differentiation in this regard. So, with reference to Kerala and the particular forms of stratification, whether it's with respect to scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, what I want to ask Dr. Raman is, what forms of indigenous movements and resistance and a parallel subaltern discourse has developed in response to this sort of urbanization and the sort of construction activities and the tourism that has been going on since I think you've worked on this extensively. So, if you could comment on it.
Yeah, that's true. I wouldn't say that there is any big subaltern sort of movements against this sort of activities, but at the same time, there are some subaltern kind of what is called activities, not in the form of a movement, but some voices of protest or local protests and like that against some sort of projects. But I must say that, I mean, when we had this, what is called a green movement in the mid 70s, led by the Kerala Shastra Sahitya Parishad and others, they were in fact raising this point that, look, first of all, you are going to displace the marginalized communities further, and apart from the fact that you would also destroy the environment. So basically, we have always been conscious of such movements, and the subalterns themselves are conscious of that. But by and large, I must say that the subaltern movements in Kerala were confined to the question of land. I mean, they were arguing for more land. I mean, we all know that in the first land reform phase, I mean, they really got excluded, particularly the indigenous people. So that's why that at a later stage, even when the government wanted to implement or pass some acts, the indigenous people were not quite happy because they know that they will get marginalized further. So they revolted against it, and those revolts came in the form of, Muttanga revolt or Changara struggles, land struggles, and like that. So those struggles were there like that, but not particularly against what is called the environmental degradation and like that. I'm not saying that they were not part of the struggles against environmental degradation. They were very much there. But if you take as a movement, I would say that because it's essentially again a question of livelihood, So they are more and more worried about their livelihood. But now we need to remember that, particularly after 2018 flood, that this sort of environmental sort of catastrophe, it is class non-neutral, because it is not just neutral. Why? Because these are the people who are living, on the banks of the river or on the sides of the hills and like that. They were already marginalized in terms of space, and you find that sort of spatial inequalities in Kerala. That inequality not just between Travancore and Malabar, it's also between, I mean, certain communities within Travancore or within Malabar and like that. So basically, this is an important question, and as far as the left government is concerned, they are very serious about addressing this question, and that's why that as part of this livelihood inclusion and what is called a financial empowerment program of the Kerala government. We just mentioned that in our book. They also started constructing houses for the indigenous landless people, and we also wanted to provide some sort of financial uh, improvement for them through some activities.
Thank you, sir, for that answer. A question that's related to this, since you pointed out this aspect of land redistribution or ensuring that everyone has land or as a for their security or as their livelihood. Uh, with reference to, and I'm invoking a parallel that I came across while studying economic history in my course. When with respect to the agricultural revolution in England, and when Brenner intervened, he posited this correlation between a larger land holding, and he said that okay, in the 18th century there was dispossession and enclosure, and as a result food productivity increased and so on. And I have found that this line of thinking has been used to critique redistributionist policies or policies that seek to divide land. So, at least at this juncture, with respect to development, and this question is open to both of you, by the way, I would like to listen to both of your insights. With respect to sort of the division of land and productivity, since, as Dr. Raman pointed out, a lot of food of Kerala is now actually acquired via the center or via other net food surplus producing states. How do we assess this link between more divided or fragmented lands and food production as such?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. In fact, if you look at the history of Travancore and also Malabar, we found that what is called until say 1860s or 70s, these regions were rice exporting regions. So basically, they were in a position to export rice, but at the same time, we find that the kind of enclosure movement that you mentioned, that was taking place from the side of colonial planters. So that's mentioned in our book, in fact. And basically, they raised the plantation monoculture in a sense at the expense of some other food crops and like that. There was so much deforestation taking place, and that was a big challenge for the livelihood of the indigenous people and like that. And also, even otherwise, over the years, we find that there was a significant shift from paddy-based ecology to non-paddy crops. So that way also, that's not part of the other kind of enclosure that you mentioned. But at one level, there was an enclosure sort of a thing. But at another level, the middle class, and the Gulf returnees, they have started buying lands, and the area under what is called cultivation, which has already declined, but which got further divided, So that has got its negative impact on productivity. So there was an argument that, look, I mean, if you got your land through land reforms, and if you are not in a position to cultivate those lands, you will have to return it or like that, or you'll have to go for a reverse sort of a policy and like that. That sort of an argument also is there in Kerala. But that's not the main point. The point is here is that, basically, somehow we have specialized in commercial crops, with the notion of comparative advantage and like that. And we have been in a position to earn more foreign exchange reserves, which implies that we are bound to get more share from the central government in terms of food grains, which we were deprived, which we were not getting. And so we started, we started negotiating with the remaining states. So that dependency is still there. So that's a question to be addressed further. Apart from the fact that we should also be in a position to increase our own production and productivity, and that's also part of the larger project of government of Kerala. Tirtho must be able to say more about that. Yeah, the enclosure sort of things. Yeah.
No. I don't want to qualify anything you said, and but I mean, not generally. I mean, the question is not necessarily about Kerala. It's also a bigger question about how you assess redistribution and productivity link more generally. And my take on this is very pessimistic, and I've written about it elsewhere. I mean, it's not necessarily that redistribution doesn't give you productivity growth, but essentially it all depends on the environment that you are talking about, the ecology you are talking about. The In a water scarce region, you can distribute land as much as you like. There will be zero growth in productivity unless more water is provided. So where you have arid region or semi-arid region, the land first of all requires water to be productive. Then you can go for double cropping, multiple cropping. Once you have water, then the next condition is biological knowledge. What kind of seeds, what kind of fertilizers you apply. Historically, in the last 300, 400 years, or right now I'm sitting in Japan. Japan had an agrarian revolution in the 17th, 18th century. It's all the same story: manage water and manage biological knowledge. Where land distribution comes in, I don't really know where it comes in. I mean, it probably does in some environments where both of these are in plentiful supply. You know what to do, and you have plenty of water, you have lots of choices. Then if you get a plot of land, you can make use of it. If not, then it doesn't matter.
Uh, Thank you, sir, for that answer. So I'd like to ask a question on one of the
No,
pertinent
but
issues that Kerala is
just
facing.
Tirtho.
Yes. Thank you, sir, for that.
Yeah, yeah. Basically, the land reforms was. Oh, sorry. No, the question of land reforms, was raised by the Communist Party, was basically in terms of what is called, empowering the marginalized communities. I mean, the question of productivity never came up. So the objective was something different.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. I mean, I think I'm talking more about the way economists would justify redistribution.
Yeah.
Yeah, not the
Yeah.
political process.
Okay, I think we can move on to the next question. So, which is on a very pertinent issue that Kerala has been facing, and that's the demographic distribution of older population, right? And this is one of the long-term issues looming over the state, and there's a question on how one can take care of them. So, this is a soft spot for many and has been demonstrated by protests in India over discontinuation of particularly, say, the old pension scheme. So, in conjunction with Kerala's fiscal issues, they have existed for a long time by now. And what does this exactly portend? So, like, what sort of a policy trajectory ought to be taken in this regard, do you think, Professor Roy?
This is actually more a question for Ravi, I think.
Yeah. Basically, that's true. I mean, that, yeah, in a sense, I mean, that's a question to me. The thing is that, yeah, first of all, we need to remember that Kerala is a state which has lost its what is called a demographic dividend as against the government of India. Because government of India has got that benefit now. The average age is 29, and that's why you say that India has become the youngest country in the world. But Kerala is not so. I mean, more than 60% of the, sorry, 20% of the population is above 60 years. So the thing is that they wouldn't be able to contribute more to the economy. And knowing well that they won't be able to contribute, but at the same time, that the state is bound to provide all kinds of welfare measures for them, we allocate funds for the benefit of old age people. you know I mean, in fact, even last month, I had to visit various what is called old age care homes run by the government of Kerala, and I had to give a small reports, and official reports are also coming up. So what I'm trying to say is that we have certain projects in the pipeline, and we will certainly uh, take those projects and build up our what is called solutions. And I'm sure that at the moment, you all know that it's part of the larger welfare state, and we provide in nearly 40% of the population in Kerala, including the old age population, they get free access to health. I mean, so that means we already very serious about taking care of the old age population. But at the same time, we also wanted to, I mean, strengthen this process of caring the old age, and that's very much there. And both in terms of allocation of funds, and also in terms of what is called shaping up certain policies.
Okay, can I join in this discussion? I mean, not so much
Yeah,
about the
yeah,
old age care, because that is more a public policy or social security thing. That's quite a different set of policies. But in terms more broadly, in terms of the demographic, I mean, where you are on the demographic curve and what it means in terms of future growth potential, that's a bigger question. And I think there's a lot of focus on that question now. I mean, if you read Ashoka Modi's book, or Raman Lamba and Raghuram Rajan's book, um, uh, the more recent one, I mean, these are all assessments of India which are very squarely fall on quality of workforce, quality of jobs, and in relation to that quality of workforce, what is the capability of doing things. And they're both have a very pessimistic message about both of these. So they identify this as a major problem of the quality of the labor force, and what kind of opportunities in the labor market creates for that. So I mean, that's not old age. I mean, that's not originally your question, but in terms of the average working age, I mean, Kerala and the rest of India are not very different. I mean, they both have a quality of work problem and quality of workers problem. So from that point of view, I mean, if you look at more basic measures of healthcare or education, literacy is an extremely broad measure. I mean, all of that is old discussion. Yes, there's been a success, fine, but in terms of skilling and capability, Kerala is not very different from the rest of India. The younger population is struggling, and that struggle is very centrally now receiving attention in big books being written on India. So it's going to be a major theme for discussion in the next 4 or 5 years, and Kerala is not an exception to that norm.
Yeah, that's true, Tirtho. But at the same time, I don't know whether I can add a couple of points here.
Yeah, please, please. Yeah.
That's true. But at the same time, we find that the wage rate in Kerala is so high. Even then, you don't find many what is called people from the domestic labor force coming forward. Because they still wait for higher wages. So there is this question of what is called reserve wage rate and like that. But then the question comes up, though how would you live without having any income? So then we are bound to give an answer something of this sort, that look, they get some sort of a default income, because out of 4 or 5 households in Kerala, you find at least one person, I mean, having some jobs abroad. So that means you are getting some sort of income to your household. So that also discourages you to go for a wage work. So wage labor market for Malayalis, that is something that they don't want to accept. Maybe because of the higher levels of education. With the poor quality of skills, I do agree. But they have a higher degree of what is called a qualification, and so they first of all they can afford to wait. Secondly, they don't want to come forward. So this educated unemployment in Kerala is a very complex issue. That's what I would like to say.
So, sir, coming to education, we spoke a bit about the educated unemployment as well. The education sector in India has been burdened by like excessive regulation, and the national education policy that was implemented in 2020 seek to challenge some of the inefficiencies in higher education. So, referring to your discussion of the challenges in higher education in the book, what impact do you believe the NEP could have addressing these issues in Kerala, if any?
Yeah, the thing what I would like to add in this context is that we are accepting a new economic policy, but not, I mean, in its full sense. We make our own changes in that new education policy. We have our own changes made in the new education policy. We have offered so much what is called flexibilities in the given framework by the government of India. We don't just want to accept the policy as it is. So that means, first of all, we have so many options given to the students. That is one thing that I thought of adding that. Secondly, as Tirtho has rightly pointed out, the skills, the quality, that way they are not that competent at the moment. So as part of this new project, we are offering new spaces for them to what is called to skill themselves. So they will have to skill themselves. They will have to go for multiple skilling process and like that in the fourth year particularly. And as part of that, as part of our planning for accentuating this process, we are going to start what is called skill parks in campus. So in many college campus, you are going to see new skill parks coming up. Those are students, apart from the classroom sort of learning, they can also take part in the actual activities of what is called manufacturing and like that. Particularly, this is going to be integrated with the what is called ITIs in Kerala. So we have such new projects coming up in Kerala.
Can I?
Thank you.
Yeah. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Chris, if you have something to add, please go ahead.
No, no. I just, I mean, so this is very general. I think Ravi has answered that question well enough. In terms of quality of institutions in education, there is no real shortcut here. And one thing that you realize very quickly if you are in the education business like us is that more pumping more money doesn't give you a better university. It's a completely different culture there, and it's a kind of best universities in the world work like a guild where the professors run the place. Everybody else is a support staff. So that kind of culture doesn't quite exist in a primarily statist university system, which India's is. We are changing now. We are moving away from that, but it's a long haul. It doesn't just happen quickly. So what really happens in that kind of a guild is that there's a very strong synergy between research and teaching. people who actually write, teach history, people who go to the lab, teach science. That's kind of that kind of synergy is very important for building reputation and also building quality of teaching. And then you can be at the frontier. But there is no quick road to that model. It takes time. So and definitely more funding will not get you there.
Absolutely, sir. Well pointed out. Um, since we have touched upon education and several other aspects, I would like to touch upon another aspect that the book covered, especially regarding the legacy of leftist movements. And one thing that have accompanied them has been this strand of union interventions in, let's say, reorganization of workplaces, attempts to, let's say, sometimes Luddite tendencies as well occasionally. I'm not saying necessarily to Kerala, but in other places as well. So I wanted to ask both of you regarding what the impact of union-led movements have been in Kerala, because I remember encountering this paper by Besley that really talked about the impact of, let's say, union movements uh, or union intervention in, let's say, production and the uh, overall trends in productivity as such. So, what is the take of both of you on this matter of unions and productivity?
So, Tirtho, you please.
Shall I go first? No, okay, well,
Yeah.
it's a funny kind of topic because Ravi has been very centrally engaged with left politics for a very long time. I mean, he's an insider, and I dislike the left. I dislike unions. Ravi is very very close to unions, so I mean, we are still very close friends. So I mean, that doesn't come between us. But I'll tell you why I dislike unions. I think I mean, it's a complex question because trade unions, especially not so much in factories, but in plantations or agricultural unions, as Kerala has seen a very strong movement. These are at one level, they are doing collective bargaining with employers, but at another level, they are social organizations. They are collective organizations that are mobilizing people around many issues, not just workplace issues. So it's very hard to say that they're a failure or a success. I mean, there are different dimensions of these works, but in terms of I come from West Bengal, so I've seen a very damaging unionism there. So in terms of purely workplace movements, trade unions have had a somewhat darker history. I would believe, and that's the reason why I dislike it. But I mean, anybody can disagree with that point of view because they are not just workplace bodies.
Yeah, but I mean, I think as Tirtho has already pointed out, I would obviously have a very different view on that. I mean, even yesterday I was saying this in a seminar that look, I mean, you have a very different kind of global capitalism taking place, and if you look at the macro figures, you find that the growth rate of what is called labor earnings that lag behind what is called the labor productivity, uh, particularly in India. So if you come to a case of what is called this Kerala Union and like that, again, you know, they might have felt that their earnings are much less when compared to, I mean, it's not measured in that sense. But what I'm trying to say is that you have this macro picture, and obviously the labor earnings when compared to the productivity or when compared to the profit. We all know that the corporate profit to GDP ratio in India is 15-year high now. 15-year high, the corporate profit to GDP ratio in India. So you take the case of labor, it is very minimum, it is very less. Their earnings, lag behind the growth of all other things. So in the case of Kerala, I mean, we have written that it is true that they put some constraints on growth of what is called the market forces or other kinds of activities. Particularly, they put constraints for the inflow of private investments for a long period. But then we find that, and that was also the period coincided with low growth in the economy, 80s, particularly 80s. But then we have argued in the book that, look, from 90s onwards, and also particularly from 2000 onwards, we find that this growth surge taking place. So the other is gradually coming down, both in terms of number and also in terms of their activities and like that. So basically, I think we need not be worried much about this. That's what I personally think.
Well, I did not anticipate such divergent views on that question, but I'm glad I asked it nevertheless. So we'll, I think, gradually open up now for questions on the floor. But before that, and I said gradually because in case either of you would like to make any closing remarks to address issues that perhaps we weren't able to raise via our questions, and then after those closing remarks, we can look for questions in the chat box. So please go ahead.
Ravi, you want to say something?
No, let it open to the floor, and then if some
Yeah.
questions come up.
Yeah. I think, yeah. I mean, I'm not constrained for time. So if you take 5 minutes extra or 10 minutes extra, no problem.
Yeah.
So now we can begin with the question session, I guess. Those who are comfortable with speaking on the mic can raise their hands. We'll begin that way. And if you're not comfortable, we can have questions in the comment box also.
Sure.
Okay, we do have.
Okay, since nobody is asking a question, so I just want to add something. It's a wonderful experience again, sir. And Tirthankar, sir, I'm hearing you or listening to you after a gap of many, many years. When I was a student, then I had heard you. So it's the
Oh, I see.
same
Yeah.
privilege. Yes, it's rather a
Thank you.
compliment for both of you. It was really a very informative and very nice session. So since no student was asking a question, so I thought of breaking the mold and then just
Sure. Go ahead.
I mean, spoiling the monotony. I would expect the students to come up with some good questions. It was a wonderful session, sir. I personally enjoyed a lot, and I am sure the other students would have also learned and enjoyed it. Thank you both the sirs. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Tirtho,
Yeah.
thanks.
Okay. There's some serious
Okay.
questions.
Yeah, we do have
Oh,
some questions. So first is
yeah,
a question
please.
from Niranjan Yadav. So what do you think states like Bihar and UP can learn from the Kerala model?
Shall
Tirtho.
I? Shall I take that? Um, no, I think no, that's a great question. It's a very important question, because I think that message that Kerala model, that public goods policy is a very important should be a very important focus for state governments. That message still stands, and I think that message has actually filtered into public policy much more now than 50 years before, across all states in India. So it's a very positive thing, and I think it's been a major success of economists who have been saying that more thrust on public goods is something India needs. healthcare and education, basically. So there is a lot more investment there. There are huge problems about achieving quality in both, but probably more in education than in healthcare. Healthcare has a more standardized menu. Education quality is much harder to judge and deliver. So there is a lot more that needs to be done with education, but I think overall the movement has been in the right direction. So there is, I mean, I'm positive that in UP and Bihar you will have the same kind of movement, which all adds up to something that I showed in the slide before, that states are actually converging on literacy and basic measures of healthcare. That there is no more an exceptionality to Kerala. I mean, all other states are doing what Kerala had done about 70, 80 years before.
Yeah, I mean, in that context, actually, the UP and Bihar, they will have, I think they have a lot of things to learn from Kerala model in terms of what I would say state making process. The state making process is very important. You have a different kind of politics that's always going on in Kerala, and as part of that, uh, you find new pressures on state. I mean, of course, it has been labeled in several ways. I mean, politics from below or public politics and like that. But that's not the point I'm saying. What I'm saying is that the state capacity has been expanded in a place like Kerala. But if you look at UP or Bihar, even if you have funds from the central government, even if you have funds from your own people, you know, you don't have the capacity to implement certain projects. That's lacking. So the state capacity has to be expanded uh, in such a way that you will be able to implement your concrete projects imaginatively.
Thanks for the answer. We have another question by Yash Asti. Hello, sir. Owing to a resurgence of nationalism and isolationism, there has been a recession of globalization. What impact does this have on an integrated economy like Kerala, particularly in terms of remittances?
Yeah. I think no, that's a great question. But I mean, nationalism is a kind of political stance. It doesn't immediately translate into very concrete policies. But and in India's case, it's probably more visible in foreign policy statements than in economic policy. So I'm not very pessimistic about the political side of things, because India has been integrating. It's such a huge force that no political party can really stop. I mean, there are a massive number of people out abroad who are in various ways connected with India, as I mean, as investors, as workers, as employees of a company which is based in India. All sorts of ways India is integrating, and that's a huge pressure on keeping certain kind of integration policies going. And I think that benefits most states. I mean, right now Kerala is no exception in terms of export of people. I mean, in fact, Gulf migration has been taken over by UP and Bihar, primarily UP.
Yeah,
Malayalis are not leading that flow anymore. So
yeah,
I mean, that sort of thing will have to be. I mean, there are strong local pressures to keep that going.
yeah. Yes, yes. I would also completely agree with that. And in fact, in our book, we have certain critical statements like that. For instance, in one context, we wrote that the Kerala economy, Kerala model would be long dead. I mean, without this Gulf money. That means, it was basically Gulf remittances. I mean, that helped reproduce Kerala model. I mean, in that sense. So this global integration, in fact, in another context, we highlight that point. You had to go for a higher level of global integration. I mean, earlier Tirtho was discussing this Kerala's connection with West Asia. But as we were discussing this, what is called the case of tea, for instance. I mean, it is true that from the what is called application of FARA onwards, the foreign capital left, and it transferred to the local Kerala Malayali capital and like that. But then it got oriented, the production process and the marketing got oriented within India. So basically, in that process, we lose. So we'll have to go for higher levels of integration, not just in terms of commodities, but also in terms of what is called a labor, population, and like that. For which we would obviously go for higher levels of education and skilling.
Thanks for the answer. We have another question by Disha Banerjee. As per your book, Kerala has been experiencing a reindustrialization recently. What can the rest of India, which, as per Danny Roderick, has been undergoing premature deindustrialization, as well as states like Bengal, which have long lost their special status in the global economy, learn from this?
Yeah, I can take that. Well, first of all, there is a huge problem with data to support any of these. I mean, you can get the data probably for all India, but if you break it up into states, then what you can get is employment shares in industry, services, and agriculture. What you do not get often is a very reliable income share or an investment share, and without that, it's very hard to judge in which direction the economic structure is changing. Now, what we do in the book is not really go for data, but just look at some of the new enterprises that have emerged in the last 15-20 years. Medium-sized companies, there's quite a significant number of them. In terms of employment share, the service sector still dominates, and that has not changed very much. What we need to capture is productivity. I mean, what is this employment producing? And both in services and in industry, you have a new set of enterprises which are actually very highly productive. Um, sorry, very highly productive. So that's but I mean, how productive, what kind of share of income or investment is coming from that? I mean, that there is a big question mark there. I mean, we do not really know very much. But well, the upshot is that I would hesitate to call that a re-industrialization, because that judgment will have to wait. But that there has been a new types of enterprise in industry, there is no question. I mean, look at almost anything in rubber, spice, plywood, or almost anything that is a natural resource based industry. There has been a tremendous value added there. In new types of companies have come in, which are almost always have some kind of connection abroad, whether these are entrepreneurs who worked in the United States or West Asia and then came back. In similarly in services, I mean, you have very high quality private nursing homes or surgeries, which have sometimes been set up by doctors who worked abroad, and these are technologically very highly developed, and there is a kind of medical tourism that Kerala attracts because of this. So there has been a leveling up in both service and industry, and that's a very important part of this Kerala transformation story, because what's really happening with Gulf migration is not money moving into television sets and consumption and a fancy house. I mean, that's something that we saw when I was a student in Kerala in 1980s. That is the kind of effect we would see, that there are a lot of fancy houses coming up with Gulf money. That is not the case anymore. Gulf money has moved very significantly into investments, into high quality services and high quality industries. Um, it's very hard to capture exactly how that process has happened, but there is no question that it has happened. Without investment, you don't get growth, and exactly where the investment has happened is still a black box.
Yeah, in that context, actually, I must add that Kerala also is very particular in investing in what's called a knowledge economy. I mean, the AI or
That's right.
in info park or new phases of
Yeah,
techno park and like that. So we spend a whole lot of money on what is called a knowledge economy services and like that.
that's right. That's right.
So I think so. First of all, thanks for the answer, and I think so. That's all we have for the question session. Going ahead, I'd like to invite Rajesh Shah. Okay,
Hello.
There's one
okay, we
more.
do have one question. Okay.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question, sir?
Go ahead.
Okay. So, sir, Kerala has a very unique way in regard to primary health center, and recently the state has revamped its existing primary health centers into family health centers to provide a comprehensive primary care as a part of a mission. Right now, I am not able to recall the name of the mission, but how these health initiatives are a factor in boosting the overall development of Kerala, and how the other states of India can learn from this.
Ravi.
Yeah, definitely. Sorry, Tirtha, you want to say?
No. I thought this is for you.
Yeah, yeah. Certainly, I mean, we have always been very, very particular in strengthening our primary healthcare system, and recently we went for what is called the Ardram mission, and I think that's what you are trying to say. Basically, as
Yes,
part of
sir.
that, yeah,
Thank you.
we strengthen the primary health center uh, from from different dimensions. In the sense that even in the local, what is called a primary health center, you may find doctors now. Earlier, they were not there, but now you find doctors sitting there, and also they may sit until 6 o'clock in the evening because we are very particular in taking care of the migrant workers because so they can come to the clinic only after 4 or 5. So we thought that okay, let the doctors sit until 6. So it's like that we are working, and apart from that, we also strengthen the paramedical services. I mean, through training and training programs and like that. So basically, this primary health center or primary health services are getting strengthened in Kerala, and we allocate more funds for that.
Thank you, sir, for the answer. Now, moving ahead, I'd like to invite Rajneesh Shah, the Vice President of Caucus, the discussion forum, for a vote of thanks.
Hello everyone. First and foremost, I'd like to extend my heartfelt thanks to Dr. Ravi Raman and Professor Tirthankar for gracing us with their presence and sharing their wealth of knowledge and expertise on this crucial topic, despite their busy schedule. Professor Roy and Dr. Raman, with their vast experience and insights, have helped us better understand the complexities of Kerala's evolving historical, geographical, economical, cultural, and political landscape. I would also like to give a special thanks to our PIC, Dr. Saurabh Kumar, for his presence. Thanks to all members and participants for joining us. Let's continue to work towards a more informed and interconnected world. Thank you. This concludes our session.